Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Sane-ish podcast. For people healing with trauma, addiction, abuse, mental health struggles, grief, narcissists, and every other flavor of chaos life can throw at you, and sometimes still functioning mostly. I'm your host, Holly Broughton, survivor, truth teller, boundary setter, and proud member of the Still Healing, Still Hilarious Club. Around here, we don't do shame, embarrassment. We don't do perfection. Just real talk, dark humor, hard truths, and a whole lot of hope. Because sanity is overrated and healing, that shit is messy. So this is Sane-ish, and let's get into it. So today, and I'm already crying because I was laughing too hard. So as usual, I have asked one of my longtime friends to if she would be a guest on my show, and I'm very grateful because she said yes. And this is one of the this is one of the gifts of recovery. And one of the gifts of recovery is and this is, I was in treatment 18 years ago at a facility in Monroe, North Carolina, back in the day, which is no longer there, by the way. And which I'm very grateful for today. But I was in there, and then this woman came in, and she and I both got sober there. And it's very rare that you find a person that stays sober as long as you do. I mean, if you both stay sober, at the same time. So I'm gonna introduce her. Her name is Sally Jones, and she's traveled this journey with me, and she and I have had some interesting things happen. We've gone to meetings together. We've had interesting things happen together. We've had hard times together, and here's one interesting fun fact. She actually went with me when I was pregnant. She went with me to my not my labor classes. She went to my, what was it called, Sally? My
like childbirth, Lamaze, or whatever.
Childbirth classes.
Yeah.
Previous, but yeah. Anyway, that's how important she is to me. So anyway, Sally, welcome to Sane-ish. Thank you so much. And I will let you take over. So tell us how you got here and how your life has turned around.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Sally Jones. I'm an addict, and my clean date is 11/3 of 2006. Like Holly said, Holly and I, she's probably the closest person that I've known in recovery that I got clean with. So I'll back up a little bit and tell my story. So I went to treatment 3 times over the course of 16 months. The last time was where I met Holly, the treatment center up in Monroe that she talked about. And my intention when I went into that treatment center in Monroe was to just get clean, or to just get detoxed and go right back out. I had been to 2 previous treatments. I could not stop using. I have such a great deal of respect for people who can come into meetings off the street, get clean, do outpatient, that type of thing, because I just couldn't do it. I could not put the drugs down. And I had really gotten to the point where I just resigned to the fact that I was going to die, and I was okay with that. It was, addiction is a beast. And I know a lot of people, if you're struggling, everybody knows what a beast it is to overcome. So, like when I went in, I just was going to get detoxed and keep using. And I had kind of a life-changing moment when I was there. And I'll come back to that part of the story. Because I want to talk about, I think it's important that we share our testimonies, and because everybody can relate to somebody else's testimony. We can all pick something from, our past, or, I've told my story before and people are like, you just told my story, so I think it's important to let people know what happened, what it's like now, what happened, how we got here, what it was like, and what it's like now. Because I have a life today that is beyond my wildest dreams. I really do. I never thought I could have the life that I have. But I grew up in a small town in Illinois. I have two brothers. I have a brother who's 13 years older than me, and I have one that's 2.5 years older than me. A big part of my story, which I think led to my addiction, is the fact that I'm adopted. Me and my brother, that's 2.5 years older than me, were both adopted. And so as a child, really early on, we had people make fun of us. I had neighborhood kids tell me that your parents, nobody loves you, nobody wanted you, and that kind of stuff. When you're a kid, it stays with you. And even though I grew up, like, I could not have asked for better adoptive parents. I grew up in the most loving, kind, generous home. I didn't have a want in the world. I always remember that I'm adopted. I don't remember when my mom and dad sat me down and said, hey, you're adopted. I don't even remember that conversation. And so I didn't think a lot about it growing up until you would go to the doctor or somebody'd say, hey, what's your nationality? Because I don't know those things. But for any of you, and I'm sure there's somebody listening or watching who is adopted, there's this great longing inside of you, like I have abandonment issues. And there's a longing inside of you to understand, like, why, what happened, and I still to this day don't know. I don't know my biological mom. I never met her. I'm told that she's passed on. So I don't have those answers, but I hear a lot of people talk about growing up and just not feeling a part of, or not feeling like they belong, or not having close friends and that type of thing. And that's my story, my whole life. So, I got into high school, and the peer pressure and everything. I started drinking early in high school. So I would be going out with friends, going to parties, thought that I was hiding it and concealing it from my parents, but I never was. The fortunate part for me was that I never really got in trouble. I didn't get any DUIs. I got good grades. So, I look back on that now and I think about how early my addiction started. And I remember drinking in high school, and feeling like I was part of the cool kids, like, 'cause I could go to parties and drink and I could fit in. And that's all I ever wanted. I think as humans, our desire and our human nature is we want to be loved. We want to love and we want to be loved and we want to be a part of, and we want to have friends that, you have that camaraderie with.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
yeah, and then so it was like the drinking was a way for me to feel like a part of, but so, I mean, I don't think that I became an alcoholic in high school, but it certainly was a big part of my story. And the part of high school that was a little bit different for me was, like, my parents were extremely strict, stricter than any of my friends. I had the earliest curfew and that kind of thing. So I was always getting in trouble because I was supposed to be home at 11. My friends didn't have to be home until 1, and I was just constantly in trouble. And so the week before I was going off to college, I had gone out with a bunch of friends and everything, same old, same old. And I came home and I got in trouble, and my parents grounded me. And so they would not allow me to see any of my friends or anything when I was going away to college. And that was traumatic for me, because the week before I'm leaving home to go to college, I was 17 when I went to college. I started school when I was 4. I was very immature, very naive. I had no business going off to college when I was 17. But I got to college and it was like this freedom, because they were so strict. And the first 2 weeks of college, there was one night I almost died from alcohol poisoning. I was in the emergency. It was doctor place, part of the college or whatever, all night. And yet that did nothing to curtail my drinking. I felt like I was free at college. I could do what I want without being under the control of my parents. So I drank through college. I managed to graduate with honor. So again, I look back at that thinking of myself as a functioning alcoholic and everything. Graduated college, moved to Chicago, and started working. And, it was very lonely, and I used alcohol as a crutch when I was alone too. And I had been dating my college sweetheart for a couple years, and then I got up to Chicago. And he was like the first love of my life. And we ended up breaking up. And I was absolutely like crushed and devastated beyond the ability to cope. And I think that's really the turning point of when I became a full-fledged alcoholic, because I was drinking every day to excess. I literally go to work, come home, stop and get a 12-pack and come home and down it, be hungover the next morning. And I did that for about 2 years. And there was one point in that I woke up so sick. I used to get horrible hangovers. And I was like, I can't do this anymore, and I literally stopped. And I'm telling this part of the story for a reason, because I stopped drinking for probably a year. When I got into recovery later, there's a saying in our in the basic text that says, we looked at the stopping rather than the using to justify our behavior. And so I never really accepted the fact that I was an alcoholic, because I looked at the times that I was able to put it down, and able to stop, and that's really not the definition, because when I would pick it back up again, I was full blown addict and using and or drinking and, drinking to blackout and drinking with the intention of blacking out. So that didn't last, but I did have periods of, drinking, not drinking. I ended up getting married, late in my 20s. I ended up getting married, and I started having some back problems. Like I would throw my back out probably like once a year. I'd be in bed for a week. I'd go to the doctor and they'd put me on anti-inflammatory and pain meds and everything. And I hated those medicines. I literally hated it. Couldn't wait to get off of them. Absolutely just, made me feel like a zombie. And then it got to the point where I ended up having to have surgery. My husband and I moved from Chicago to North Carolina. I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And right after we moved here, I threw my back out. And kind of the same story. I went to the doctor and everything. And this time, my back never recovered. And so I ended up making the decision to have a surgery. But during that time, once again, I went to the doctor, and they gave me something really, really strong. I was in a lot of pain. And for whatever reason, that time when I took that pain medicine, it was like, oh, it was that chasing. It was the high that I think I continued to chase. And my addiction was that first high. I remember it distinctly. And the medicine, I was on medicine for about 6 months before I even had the surgery. And I knew, even in that time of taking that medicine, that I was getting addicted to it, and questioned, am I having this surgery because I need it, or am I having this surgery because I know that I have an unlimited supply of medicine then. And I remember making a phone call to a friend to talk to him about it, and they didn't answer the phone. And I made the decision to go ahead and have that back surgery. That's changed my life in a number of ways. So during that surgery, they severed the main nerve root in my spine. I can't put into words the kind of pain. You can't even comprehend that kind of pain. I know I couldn't. I was in the hospital for 2 months, and I was, basically just, disabled for a couple of years. My mom actually came and lived with us, and during that time, the doctors didn't take any accountability. They thought I was like drug seeking, which I was, but I was drug seeking to relieve my pain. They weren't giving me what I needed, and I ended up um, doing what we do. I ended up getting it on my own. So the guy that lived next door to me had a back surgery as well. He was a traveling nurse and he had a back surgery as well. Anyway, he had a source for whatever I wanted, and it became full-fledged on using from that point. So, I was getting medicine from the doctor, I was getting medicine from him, and that went on for 4 or 5 years. I mean, I literally have maybe a dozen memories between 2002 and when I went into treatment the first time in 2005. And I lived in a blackout for about 3.5 years.
Mm.
And there was one day I was trying to work, and I used to carry my medicine with me. I had it like on my keychain, had to have it on me at all times. And that lid had come off, and all the medicine fell out wherever I was, and I didn't have it. My next door neighbor couldn't get any. I was out from the doctor, and I'm one of the most dope sick I've ever been in my entire life. And I don't recommend anybody, if they're going through that, you need to go to the doctor if you're going to try to detox, because what I found out later is I could have died. It's one of the drugs that I was on was Xanax, and alcohol you can die from, you can have seizures from. Xanax, same thing. Opiates, not so much. You're just gonna wish you're gonna wish you felt like you're gonna die. But I was at home on the floor. I was curled up, just like for about 4 or 5 days. I finally broke down, went to the hospital, and they gave me enough medicine to last me probably like 2 weeks until I could get in to see the doctor. Came home, and I remember going to sleep. I thought I had taken just a couple of those pills, and I came home, and I fell asleep. And the next morning I woke up and I was like, I'm so grateful I've got 2 weeks of medicine left. And I went to open it up and there were two pills left. So I had taken 2 weeks of medicine in one night. And at that point, it was like I realized I had a problem. And it was about a week later of just fighting that being dope sick. I had a little bit of a come to God moment because I was curled up on the floor in my house and just not knowing what to do. This is a pretty strong testimony too. I'm
What
getting a
was
little.
was your husband still around?
No, we were gone at that point. I forgot.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm kind of
Okay.
fast
No, no,
forwarding,
no.
but yeah, I mean, a year after I had that back surgery, my husband and I split, and that's
Okay.
when I also met this guy that was my drug dealer that lived next door. And between the grief and the pain of the loss of my marriage, and trying to deal with my back pain, it was just like it was on, you
Okay.
know.
Okay.
So that was my husband and I split in '02, and so fast forward 3 years to 2005 of me using hard for 3 years. But being dope sick, I was laying on the floor in my house in the fetal position, and I literally cried out like, God, I can't do this anymore. Enough is enough. And I felt the warmest sensation from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. It was like just this overwhelming warmth and love that filled my entire body. And I literally, it was almost like he picked me up, took me to the phone. I had a landline at the time, called my therapist, and I said, I need to go to treatment. And I didn't even know what treatment was. It was just kind of a supernatural moment in my using. So I did go to treatment. That was in August of 2005 was the first time I went to treatment. I was horribly embarrassed. I was ashamed. I didn't want to be an addict. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I couldn't accept the fact that I was there. The problem is I wanted to figure out a way to use successfully. I think a lot of us do that. I think a lot of us cycle in and out, because we're trying to figure out how can I do this successfully,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
total abstinence is hard. It is a beast to overcome this disease. And so that treatment center, I stayed for detox, and then I left against medical advice and I walked out. And I came home. I was still shaking when I came home. I wasn't even fully detoxed. my parents had come down, and I told my parents, hey, they let me go. I'm not an addict. I was just trying to justify everything. Within 2 days of being released from that treatment center, I OD'd. I spent a night at Mercy Hospital in Charlotte. Had to drink liquid charcoal. Don't ever recommend that. It's not something you ever really want to do. Had my stomach pumped. And they sent a doctor in the next day and they asked me if I was trying to kill myself. And I was like, I'm not trying to kill myself. And again, they released me. And the thing that frustrates me the most is that there wasn't the help. They didn't come in and say, hey, we think maybe you need to go to treatment. Have you considered this? There was no services or anything offered to me at that point. What they did send me home with was a list of places to go to treatment. So I came home, same thing. I OD'd, I just OD'd and drank charcoal, and I came home and I did it all over again. And I woke up 2 days later, and I don't really remember this. I just remember ending up where I was. And I called one of the numbers on the list, and then I ended up at a treatment center in Statesboro, Georgia. And at the time, I don't know if they still are, but it was one of the top programs in the country. It was called Willingway Hospital in Statesboro, Georgia. Almost a lockdown facility, very, very tight, very strict. And I stayed there for 6 weeks, completed the program. Still had reservations. Like, I physically started feeling better because obviously you get all that out of your system. But I still, like, I knew in my heart I hadn't surrendered, and that's the big thing is you got to surrender to this and go all in. If you have any reservations, or if you don't think you're an addict, or you haven't accepted it, likely that you're going to continue, to keep using or drinking. So I went to a wedding a week after I left that treatment, and ended up relapsing, and drinking. So then my plan was, okay, well, we just won't use the drugs. We'll just drink and it'll be okay. Because I'm not an alcoholic. I can drink. So I did that for a number of months, did that for about 6 months. And, most likely it's like we have to abstain from any mood or mind altering drug. You got to abstain from drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, anything that's going to change your mood. As addicts, we're addicted to all of it.
Right.
My newest addiction is sugar, and I'll get to that. But that's a beast too. But anyway, I tried to do the alcohol maintenance plan, and that lasted about 6 months. And then the drug dealer that was my next door neighbor, he and I kind of had a parting of the ways when I went to treatment. He was like mad treatment because I'm one of his best customers, right?
Right.
But we had reconnected, and he had found a new source for all this new medicine, and we were going to do halvesies on it. We were going to split it. I'm sitting at my desk one day. He lived with his sister, so it was him and his sister next door, and he was a traveling nurse, so he wasn't always there. But I was sitting at my desk trying to work. There was a knock at my door, and I opened up the door, and his sister was standing there. She looked like a ghost, just white as a sheet. She said, I came home from work and found Wes dead. So she had come home and he had overdosed, and she found him dead. And as tragic as that story is, if it wasn't him, it would have been me. The thing about addiction is bigger, better, faster, stronger, and we had found something that was that next level and that next level and it was probably 4 or 5 days after that I went in to treatment. I kept using hard. And I had a sponsor at the time because I was still going to meetings, just wasn't, clean, but I was going to 12-step meetings. And I made the decision to go. And
Hey, Sally, can I stop you for a minute?
yeah,
wasn't there a time, if memory serves, wasn't there a time that you actually were sitting in your recliner making plans about like making plans about.
Oh, I wanted to make a living in my recliner. I wanted to figure out, forgotten about that. Yeah, I lived in my recliner. I slept in my recliner and everything. And it was like my goal in life was, let's figure out how I don't have to leave my recliner and live here. The things that were, the things that we think, you know, it was really a goal. I remember I had a dog at the time, and I remember I had a little table next to my recliner with water and lollipops and food. I didn't even want to get up to go to the refrigerator. And I used to throw those Tootsie Pops to my beagle, give her. And it's sad. It's funny, but it's kind of sad.
It's funny now, but
it's funny now. It wasn't
sad. It really is sad. But that's
5 years of insanity,
Yeah.
But so I signed up to go to First Step, and there's a little part of my story that I'm not going to put on here because I don't know what the ramifications could be. But signed up to go into First Step, and I made that decision on Halloween. That was in 2006, and they couldn't get me in for a few days, so I spent a few days just being absolutely miserable, just using to try to feel normal, just to make it until the day that I could go in. And I went November 3rd, 2006. I actually went on the 2nd. I didn't get checked in until after midnight. But so I went to treatment on the 2nd, about 10 o'clock at night. Again, my intent was to just get detoxed and to keep doing what I was doing. I didn't have any hope at the time, because I thought that I had tried everything on my own. And I wasn't praying, even though I had that moment where God picked me up off the floor and I felt that warmth and love when I asked for help. I wasn't praying because I didn't think I was worthy of prayer. I didn't think, if living this lifestyle, would he listen to my prayers? Is he going to help offer anything, And we got to treatment, and I remember the very first day, I came downstairs. I was in detox, and it was family day or something, and Holly was involved with a few other people, and they were doing kind of a scenario of family dynamics and skit and everything. And I just thought, I saw Holly and I was like, he's going to be my friend, and we became fast friends there. She's got 4 or 5 more days than I do. She was there before me, but we became fast friends there. And, we had a session with one of the counselors there. She would do these kind of like calming sessions, lights out, candles and stuff, and meditations. And she'd do us kind of like a guiding visual thing to, it's supposed to be calming and peaceful, and it's curled up over in the corner crying, And her name was Ellen. I have such fond memories of Ellen. Any of you that have any association with First Step, Ellen. But she pulled me aside and said, "Why were you crying?" She pulled me into her office for about an hour, and she asked me, literally, she's like, "Sally, are you praying?" And I said, "No, I'm not praying. Why would I? God's not going to listen to me, And she's like, "I would really encourage you, to start that relationship and start praying." And that night was the first time I honestly, sincerely prayed. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I need to change and everything. The next day, I didn't feel anything in the moment of praying, but the next day, I was walking by the desk. They give you your meds and stuff every morning. You got to eat breakfast and all that. And I was walking by, I can't remember then. I think it was Barbara. I think that was her name. She was like, "Sally, today's your day. You got to go. Your detox is up. You're getting discharged." And I was like, "I'm not leaving." And when I said I'm not leaving, I realized that the obsession, the desire, that urge in me to keep doing what I was doing was gone, and from that day forward, I've been 100% chasing my recovery. I mean, I stayed the full 28 days. I did outpatient. Holly and I did outpatient together there. The first 2 years, Holly and I went to a noon meeting every day. and then we would go, that same treatment center used to have meetings on Saturday night where they would open up the doors for people to come in, for the patients. And we would go out there every Saturday night, and it's important, it was important for me to give back. And, I know a lot of people feel this when you go through this and you struggle so much to get clean, and the hell that we've all been through, we'll do anything to help that next person not have that same story and to not go through it. So gosh, I just have such fond memories of going to the meeting with Holly every day at noon. That meeting was a hoot. That meeting did a lot for me. It was a huge meeting, and that meeting had some wonderful people in it with great senses of humor and just really supportive and uplifting. And it made me feel, that meeting, I think, had the biggest impact on my recovery. That noon meeting, it had just the support from people, the help, they got Holly and I engaged in the meetings and sharing meetings, and it was very, very impactful.
Lot of long-term sobriety.
A lot of long-term sobriety, a lot, and I called it my medicine for the day. And one of the other guys used to say there, Don used to say, I got to take my medicine for the day. I got to go to that meeting. My first sponsor was there. And she played a big role in my early recovery as well. But we did that. And then we'd go to the meeting Saturday night. Holly and I'd go out for Mexican, and we did that. Gosh, can't even remember how many times. So, that's what they tell you, is you've got to chase your recovery the same way you chased using and drinking. And we did,
Yeah.
And I think there's a few of us besides just Holly. I think there's a few of us that have stayed clean, but the percent, they tell you, 9 out of 10 of you aren't going to make it, and for the fact that the two of us became friends and we both made it, years later, it was a testament. It was a good treatment facility. They had some great people working there. And I haven't looked back,
but Sally, I want to point out too that in early recovery, it's really not that easy, because I remember, I remember when your house got broken into.
Oh yeah.
But
good memory. Gosh.
Yeah, but like, we did the thing. Like, we used, you called me, I was on it. I called Tim. Like, we used the people of the program. Like, but like, it's not easy in early recovery. It's like,
no, it was not. It's easy for me now, but early recovery, no. It's you've got to learn to deal with life on life's terms. All those things that would cause us to use, like, I forgot about that. And, my house got broken into, and that was after we had gone to that meeting, that noon meeting. I came home 2:30 in the afternoon, and my front door had been kicked in, and that would have been something that I would have used over very easily. But yeah, we encourage people to get phone numbers and stay in the meeting and talk to people before, talk to people after, because so you can build up a network of people that when you do have crazy things happen, somebody's got that experience. Somebody's gone through that before, so I had a really.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
No, it was, there were days, that I wanted to use, it was a couple years. The obsession to use was lifted for me when I went in the last time, but that doesn't mean that it's like this instant gone.
Right.
I had rough days and things happen that trigger you. You have your triggers, and that's one of the things that you have to find out in early recovery is, like, what are your triggers? What are the things that you feel that push you to make that decision to use, And I think the first couple of years, it's all about identifying those triggers so that you don't have to repeat the same behavior, And part of that, like you just mentioned, is having that network and having somebody to call and having a sponsor to run something by. My thinking gets me in trouble, left to my own devices and my own thinking, I can talk myself into anything. So yeah, it is, it's hard in the beginning, and but you have to make the decision to stay, and if you pick up, you release your addiction all over again. And I know for me today, like well, there's a lot of things that keep me clean, but I've been dope sick so many times. I don't ever want to feel that ever again.
Yeah. Yeah.
The drugs are different. I was getting stuff off the street. Nowadays I don't, everything is so tainted, and um it's different. I'm glad I got clean when I did, because it's different today, and the drugs are that much stronger, and I don't know that I would have survived, and I think there's a reason that I'm here, and I try to share my story and share my testimony with others to give people hope, because that was the thing when I was going to meetings, I kept going to all these meetings, and people would have celebrations, and they'd have cake and everything. And it was the same thing. I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to belong. I wanted to belong in recovery. And I'm like, damn, I'm never going to get here. I'm never going to get a cake,
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like think that they shouldn't celebrate. And to me, the celebration isn't to give myself accolades. It's not that at all. I don't celebrate to pat myself on the back. I celebrate to show the newcomer that, hey, you can overcome this too. If I can do it, you can do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that was a big thing for me. Hey, I just want to get a year, and the longer you stay clean, the more you change, the more your thinking changes, the more resources you have in your backpack to not use, the more life hits you and you stay clean. It shows you, at least it showed me for myself, like, hey, if I can get through this, I can get through anything, you know.
Mhm.
Since I've been clean, um, I've moved across the country twice. So when I had 6 years clean, I moved back to Illinois to help take care of my mom and dad. My mom died of Alzheimer's. My dad died 15 months later. I moved back. I had a falling out with both my brothers when I was there, and at 6 years clean, that was a lot. There were times when I did that, and I was afraid I was going to relapse because I was absolutely miserable. I picked up from a really big recovery community here, moved to a little town in Illinois called Peoria, Illinois, and they had great recovery there too. But the amount of people, you know, when you're in a metropolitan area of 3 million people and you go to a town of 100,000, it's a little, it's just different.
Sure.
And not having the relationship with my brother and everything, it was one of the hardest 2 years that I've been through in my recovery. Was the 2 years that I lost my mom and dad, and moving back here after they were gone and being away for a couple years, not talking to my family. I remember walking into this house after my dad died and driving back home. He used to always say, Sally, call me when you get home. And I came in and I sat down on my couch and I had nobody to call, and I had some grief just sweep me away for a couple of years. I got in a relationship, went through a breakup, I fought a horrible flea infestation in this house months and months and months that about made me crazy. So just that, trying to get back on my feet and trying to get back in recovery here, trying to get those friendships back, trying to get my business back. It was really, really, I really, really struggled. Early on in recovery, I had to declare bankruptcy. I was really embarrassed to say that at the time, but the treatment center that I went into, the second one that was for 6 weeks, it cost $35,000. I didn't have pot to pee in. And I didn't have any income, and I'm just trying to get clean. And it was either declare bankruptcy or lose everything. And I mean everything. I mean my house, my car, my dogs, being homeless. So I declared bankruptcy, and I've recovered from that. And none of those things caused me to use. I had a reservation when I was in treatment the last time, and they do talk to you about that. It's like, what am I going to do when my mom and dad pass? And luckily I was able to work through that before it happened, and I had the knowledge to know if you're telling yourself you're going to relapse when your mom and dad die, you're going to relapse when your mom and dad die. That's a reservation that you're holding on to, and it's giving your disease an excuse to act out, you know?
Right.
So I worked through that while they were still clean. And I haven't had to use. So I mean, I've had job loss, I've had relationship breakup, the bankruptcy, losing pets, losing my mom and dad, losing relationship with my family. And I do now have a relationship with both my brothers again. I'm really grateful for that. You know, the thing that is really cool about recovery and long-term recovery is if you stay clean and sober, anything is possible. And that's restored relationships, that's financial things, that's job, professional, family. You know, I declared bankruptcy. I did have to sell my house. My car got repossessed. This is in recovery. My car got repossessed, relationships, losing my mom and dad. Um, Today, you know, at 18 years clean, I have a very, very successful career. I'm doing a job I never even imagined I'd be doing. Absolutely love it. It's my dream job. I make very good money. I have a home, I have a car, I have 3 dogs, you know, and my life is night and day from where it was 18 years ago. I couldn't be more grateful. And, you know, I would hear early on all of these things, but I didn't know that it would happen for me. You know, I went into a new business in 2020. I'll tell people I'm a landscape architect, you know, and I kept trying to get my business back um, from early on when I moved back here from Illinois, and it was a struggle, you know, because I didn't have any money, couldn't do any advertising. It was really a struggle, and you know, for me, and I even hate to share this too because I know the world's changed since the COVID pandemic. You know, it has changed.
Mhm.
For me, that having that happen, what happened in the I'm now a swimming pool designer. I design and sell custom in-ground swimming pools and outdoor living environments and spaces. But in 2020, the guy that I work for now called me, and he was working for a different builder at the time, but he said, "Hey, would you be interested maybe in doing coming to work and doing swimming pool design because the swimming pool industry is we can't keep up. We need a designer." And I was like, "Okay," you know. And I literally fell in love with that. I always wanted to design resorts, landscape architect, and I literally fell in love with that job. There's been some trials with that. So he was with a different builder. I went and worked for the company he was with. He trained me in the swimming pool industry. I was only there for about 4 or 5 months, quit, didn't get along with the owner, went to work for a company about 2.5 hours east of here, worked there for a year. Um, they ended up withholding a lot of commission from me. Like when I say a lot, I mean like a year's worth of salary for a lot of people. They withheld that from me and didn't pay me. Left that job, had a lawsuit with them, came back, worked for another company for about 5 months. I was the top designer and salesperson for that company. They had new management come in. They came in and they took my territory from me because they would put people in territories. And so I quit that job. And then the guy that called me into the business originally in 2020 opened up his own company. And he said, "Sally, do you want to come work for me? You know, you want to run some leads?" And that was about 2.5 years ago. And I'm like, yeah. So I love my job. I'm having the best year of my career this year. I'm like extremely grateful. I work a lot, but I choose to work a lot. You know, I'm commission only. So, you know, you get back what you put into it. It's like same thing with recovery. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. You know, if you don't chase your recovery, you're not going to have very good recovery. You know, if I don't chase sales, I'm not going to have a lot of sales. So, you know, I'm kind of an all or nothing person. I always have been. That was the same way with my using. I'm all in or I'm all out, you know, and if I'm go big or go home.
Right.
So
Right.
I've really, I do put in a lot of time and a lot of effort into my job, but at the same time, I absolutely love it. And I get that feedback from my clients. Like they can tell that I'm just absolutely passionate about it, and that has helped make me a better salesperson.
And
So
do you feel like you found your family in recovery? Do you
yes
feel
and no. Yes and no. So, um, how do I say this? um, like I consider you family. We don't talk all the time, but like we have such a history and such a love between one another. I consider you family. Um, I have a lot of acquaintances in recovery, but there's also a lot of judgment that comes with people in recovery. And that's one thing I'm not about these days. Like when COVID did happen, going back to that, I hope it's okay that I even talk about this because sometimes I don't like you talking about it. But when that happened, when most of the meetings were shut down, I was going to Zoom meetings for a while. And I quit going to meetings at that point. Just because of all of I think the sad part about what happened with that whole thing is how much it divided people. And you don't have a mask on, put your mask on, and this and that, and go get a shot. And if you don't get a shot, just all of the narrative around all that to me was absolutely
yeah.
heartbreaking. And I I didn't I'm not going to adhere to what they're telling me to do. So I never, I wasn't allowed to go to meetings because they wouldn't let me in the door without a mask. And I literally quit going to meetings because of it. At the same time, I have never had a stronger relationship with God, and, you know, I won't, that's not really a recovery thing, but like I had kind of lost my way a little bit for a few years, and, God pulled me back to him in the midst of all of this as well. And I felt like I was completely delivered from this disease, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's unfortunate because, people from my home group, they judge me, oh Sally, you're gonna relapse, you're not going to meetings anymore. Or oh Sally, there's one guy in particular, I'll run into him every now and again. Well, you still clean? And I'm like, of course I'm still clean, you know? You know how you
Mhm.
can tell I'm still clean? I'm standing here in front of you having a conversation, you know? And the thing that I mean, I absolutely love recovery and the 12-step program. Don't get me wrong. It gave me my life back. It taught me. I've been through the steps 4 times, once in a group with you, Holly.
Mhm.
And I've been through the traditions twice.
Mhm.
The gift of recovery is we do recover. We do recover. We don't have to stay in our past. We don't have to stay in that pain. We don't have to constantly relive it. I don't want to go to a meeting anymore and talk about my past and talk about my using and talk about my pain because I'm not there anymore, you
Yeah.
know? And I
Yeah.
think that you get a lot of that. The last time I went to a meeting, it like triggered me. I didn't, it was just like we're focus on the solution, don't focus on the problem.
Right. Yeah.
And so with that, I have the strongest relationship I have ever had with God today. I am at complete
I've
peace.
I've
There's
I've had
absolutely,
I have to agree with you on the mask thing because
yeah.
I was at a meeting uh and we were outside.
Oh
We
my
were
gosh.
outside.
And they still made you put a mask
And they yes, and well, they didn't make me, but they were like, "Why aren't you wearing a mask?" And I said, "Because I trust God.
on. Exactly.
I
I
don't
have an
trust."
immune system.
I said, "Because I trust God rather than the mask." And anyway,
But yeah,
that's where I'm gonna stop.
yeah,
But then I also, and people have their own opinions, and that's
right. It is
fine,
fine. That's fine.
whatever. but and we can agree to disagree. But my other issue was I had uh, and I agree on the judgment because there was a time before all the issue happened with my daughter. I was going through a lot of abuse with Mark, and I had a suicide attempt and was in the hospital, woke up in the hospital with a in ICU. And when I got home and I uh, got home, I got pelted with, you need to pick up a white chip. And I said, what? And they said, you need to pick up a white chip. And I said, why? And they said, because you relapse. And I mean, I was being forced. And so I did. And then I went to my sponsor and I asked her, and she said, well, were you drug seeking? And I said, no. And she said, well, let me talk to my sponsor. And I said, okay. She did. And she got back to me and she said, no, no. And I said, okay, okay. And then this person,
to feel that judgment had to, and especially, I mean, if you're so low at that point with everything that you went through to try to make that decision, you don't need you don't need the judgment on top of it, trying to overcome that. That's just heartbreaking. It's
yeah,
heartbreaking.
and then after that, having to come back from already picking up the white
Right.
chip from being forced to do, and the whole
Yeah.
thing, the whole thing. And anyway, and so yes, I agree with
It's
that.
heartbreaking. The thing is we have to find what works for us. It's not one size fits all. You know, the 12-step meetings are a tool, and it is extremely important that you have a network and people. And in the beginning, I can't imagine having gotten clean not doing it. But at the same time, people have unfriended me, people have stopped talking to me, all because I'm not going to meetings. Does that make me less qualified as a human? Do you think that I don't have feelings anymore because I don't go to meetings? You know? And there's a lot of hypocrisy there. And that's exactly just like what you just shared. Like that's heartbreaking and tragic, Holly, and thank God you overcame that and where you are today, and thank God you had a sponsor to work you through that. But like, that is the exact reason I don't go to meetings anymore.
Well, and there are, what people don't understand is there are many pathways to recovery.
There
There are
are.
many pathways to recovery. There's not just one way. There is not just one way. There are many pathways to recovery. And if somebody chooses to change their path, that's okay too.
It is. It is. Don't judge others, like that's how the big thing is like, I'm not doing what they expect me to do or want me to do, so I'm no longer worthy. That's the message I get. I had the same home group for the entire time, and most of them don't talk to me. And I'm okay with that today, At the same time, with the 18 years that I have, I still have a large database in my phone. I still have people, like, if I felt like I was going to drink or use, I would definitely pick up the phone. I would call you, or I would call somebody else that, a former sponsor or somebody that was in my network, because not everybody's done that to me, but the majority have, and just the mere fact of being asked that question, well, are you still clean? Just really, when you're pointing the finger at someone else, you got three fingers pointed back at you.
Sure.
And I'm going to tell this to people today because, in the beginning, like we were talking about, it's a beast. That's all you can think about, right? I never, and I'm not kidding you when I use the word never, think about drinking or using. I mean, ever. the last time that I even had a moving thought of it, I just recently went to Chicago, and um, I'll make this quick. But in 1988, I lived in Chicago. I was going to work in the morning. I got hit by a semi on the Eisenhower Expressway. That semi flipped my car around, came in on the driver's side, smashed me into the concrete median, totaled my car. I had to be pulled out of the car. I didn't have any bodily injury or anything, but that was an extremely traumatic event, being hit by a semi on the highway in Chicago. And I have
Mm.
PTSD around being around semis. So fast forward, I went to Chicago a few weeks ago, and I drove, got to the northern part of Indianapolis. I'm 120 miles from Chicago. It took me 6.5 hours to go 120 miles. I got on 294 in Chicago, where there's no shoulder to pull off on. 6 lanes, both directions, concrete jungle, pouring rain, tornado warnings, completely surrounded by truckers. And it was about a 6-hour panic attack in the car. It's one of the worst I've felt in years and years and years. And getting out of that, I had about 20 minutes left to get to my Airbnb. Traffic finally started moving. And this is as close as I've ever gotten to even considering it. It was like, man, if I wasn't in recovery when I got to that Airbnb, I'd go tie one on. And that's it. It was a fleeting moment, you know. I mean, I would never act on it, you know, and that's how far removed I am, because early on in recovery, that would have sent me straight to the bar, you know, to just
Yeah.
try to calm my nerves. But I'm really, really grateful for that, you know, because one of the things that I wanted early on is like, and I questioned, was like, am I ever going to feel normal? Am I ever going to get through a day where it's not this thing that's in my head thinking about the past, or thinking about bills, or thinking about using, or do I need to go to a meeting, or, you know, just all of that talk, you know, that we hear. Am I ever going to feel normal? And the answer to that is yes. You know, if you stick and stay, you will, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And even though you and I don't talk every day, we still have that connection. Like
Yeah,
I know I can pick up the phone and
for sure.
call you. And I know, like, Jason is another one that we got sober with. And
You got to get him on.
yeah, I know. And I know that I could pick up the phone and call him, even though I
Hmm.
haven't talked to him in like forever. You know, it's just
We have
that.
this bond, you know, like the group of us that went through, we have a we have a bond, you know.
Right.
Even, I mean, I haven't spoken to Jason in 15 years, 14, 15 years, but I know if I ran into him or saw him or whatever, we'd be right back to, you know, where we
And
were,
that's
and
very
connected.
rare that
Mm-hmm.
it's very rare that people who have gone into rehab at the same time stay sober that long, really.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think. I mean, I
Yeah.
could be wrong,
I
but
mean, we had like 5 or 6 of us. I've lost track of the other ones, but I do remember you and Jason. I remember Julie. I can't remember the older guy's name that had the short brownish hair. His
Steve,
name was it Steve?
Steve,
Maybe.
I don't know.
I can't
But
remember.
yeah, so, but anyway, I'm just very grateful, um,
Me too.
and for the experience and our connection and all that kind of stuff, because we have had some good times and funny
We've
times.
had a lot of laughs. I mean, I look back on, you know, just thinking about this podcast all week, just brought back so many memories of
Oh,
going
I
back to
know.
First Step and going to Daily Reprieve, going to the meetings, and just the we have laughed a lot, a lot, a lot,
Yeah,
a lot. And that's laughter's medicine, you
it
know.
is medicine. I totally agree.
I want to touch on one of the things I touched on this, you know, addiction is not just drugs and alcohol, you know, it's many facets. So I've also gained and lost 50 pounds in my life, probably a dozen times. You know, when I moved to Illinois, I gained about 50 pounds and in 2 years with my mom and dad. That was from 2012 to 2014. I got clean in '06, came back to Charlotte in 2014, and I'm like, the weight's gonna fall right back off. It's gonna fall back off. Well, it didn't, you know. So when I ended up starting this job in the pool industry, I was working out of town for another builder. That was in 2020, early 2021. Um, I was 80 pounds heavier than I am right now, and my knees were really, really hurting. And I was commuting over there and staying over there, and I was having a hard time like navigating the job sites. And I can't believe I'm telling the story. There was one day I had to meet a builder at this new home, and it was under construction. And so they had just a piece of wood that went up to this really tall stoop. And this guy had to like help me up. I couldn't even walk up this little, it wasn't even that narrow a plank, but I couldn't get up. And so he helped me up. We had our meeting, getting ready to leave, and I couldn't get out of the house. There were no stairs to get out of the house. You know, he just jumped down. It's probably about 4 feet down. And I'm like, I can't go back down this ramp. So I'm like, I'm just going to sit down, and then I'll jump, and then I'll just shimmy myself down. And as I go to sit down, I fell backwards. I like fell out. It was the most mortifying. And this guy was a perfect gentleman. Like, he turned his back, and I got in my car and I started crying. And
Oh,
I'm like, okay, this is like no more excuses, Sally. No more excuses. And so I had a friend who was doing keto, and she was super successful on it. And so I made that decision that very day. No more excuses. Because I'm a sugar addict, I'm an ice cream addict. I didn't know that at the time. So I jumped on keto from that day forward, and I lost like 60 pounds right away. And I mean, my knee pain was gone. I felt good, and I maintained it for probably 2.5 years, 3 years. And then I went on a couple vacations back in 2022. And I just slid back into eating normal food, and I gained back about 25 pounds. And so in March of, not this year, but March of 2024, so about 16 months ago, I was like, if you're going to gain back all your weight, if you don't do something, you know. So I challenged myself to do, and this is not about carnivore, this is what I do for me. I challenged myself to do carnivore for 90 days, you know, with the intent of going back to keto. Um, and I did that successfully. And at 90 days, I was like, there's no turning back. So I've been carnivore for 16, 17 months. And what I found doing carnivore is I'm a sugar addict. As soon as I pick up sugar, I crave sugar and I want it again. But I lost an additional 60 pounds doing carnivore, you know. And I'm talking about this too because I went on vacation in April. I had a dear friend pass. My work has been really stressful, so I've not been strict carnivore for the past like 60 days. And I have been eating sugar. There's a donut shop by my work, and I've been getting donuts, and it's the same thing. You release your addiction all over again, you know. And I gained back 7 or 8 pounds, and I started eating donuts, pizza, and just the more sugar you eat, the more sugar you want. Same thing with drugs, same thing with alcohol. And so just a week ago, I did a 72-hour fast. Um, I did a 72-hour water fast. Now I'm committed to doing, 30 days of carnivore again without having any sugar. Because when you do that, it's total abstinence from all drugs, and for me, it's not about drugs and alcohol, but it's total abstinence from sugar and carbohydrates now. Because for me, not everybody needs to do this, but for me, sugar and carbs and everything, it causes severe inflammation, and pain, and my knee pain comes back instantly. So nowadays it's more about that, fighting the sugar and carb. And sugar is it's more addictive than anything on and saying everything. You can't
yeah.
avoid it hardly. So, but anyway, so it's not just about drugs and alcohol, but I probably couldn't be successful on carnivore and couldn't be successful at abstaining from sugar had I not had the experience of what I went through and having those tools that you learn in recovery, because
Well, it's also about discipline too.
yeah,
We don't like to be told what to do, and we also don't like discipline. I don't. I don't like discipline.
Yeah.
So, but
It's
that's what,
hard. When somebody tells you you can't have something, you want it more. That's probably human nature.
yeah,
And so it is, it's a mind, the mental part of the disease of addiction is the hardest thing to overcome. And that's the same with sugar, food, whatever you're fighting. It could be, some people battle pornography, some people battle stealing, some people, everybody's battling something that we don't know anything about. And it's the
sure,
mental part of it that you've got to get a grip on to make those changes. You have to act your way into better thinking. We've talked about that a lot early on. You can't think your way into better acting. You have to act your way into better thinking. So like I'm on a bunch of carnivore groups now because that's a big part of my life. And I see women on their posts like, okay, well, my husband and I are going to start next Sunday. And I'm like, I did that with the drugs. I used to try to choose my clean date, or I'm going to start then or after this vacation. And I'm like, you can't, it doesn't work that way. You've got to like start right now. If
yeah,
nothing changes, nothing changes. And
right,
you can't think your way into acting that. The thinking comes after you act. Like after eating all that sugar, that 72-hour fast was not easy.
yeah,
It was not
right,
easy. And that took a lot of mental strength to get through that. But like, I'm not craving sugar. That 72-hour fast and 5 days of carnivore, I don't have any desire for sugar again.
yeah,
So
yeah. So, well, that's, yep, mine's shopping. So, I mean, it could be anything.
it
It could be
can, it
anything.
can, it can be anything. It's like we're looking for something to fill that void, right? All, whatever it is.
That's it. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about that triggering that obsession.
Right. Exactly.
So,
100%.
and the
Yeah.
whole. So,
Yep.
and that nothing's going to fill it,
No,
except
what's filled it, the thing that's filled it for me is God and my relationship with Jesus. That's the only thing that has, and that sustains me now. It really truly does.
exactly. And you're never going to find it out there. It's it,
No,
it's in
it's
here.
right.
It's in here.
Yep.
So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's the issue. And you have to love yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
which is where recovery happens.
Yeah.
But it's a daily thing that you have to continue to work on. And at
It
least for me,
is. And
at least for me,
it
that's
is for me too. I mean, like there's always something, but there's always something that once you have that, the basis and the knowledge, and the longer you're here, the easier it becomes. Or when you have something that you're trying to overcome, you don't stay in it as long. In the beginning, you'd stay in it and it's all about narrowing that down and down and down and down so that when you do go through something, you've got that toolkit to get through it and you're not in it as long.
yeah.
So,
And Lord knows I am not perfect.
nor am I.
I will always be under construction. So I will never be finished with this thing. So
No,
I don't
absolutely
ever
not.
want to. I don't ever want to say that I'm
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. I mean, I have a friend who hates it when I say I'm an addict. She hates that. She's like, "No, you were an addict," and it's like, "No, I am an addict. I'm still an addict. I have no qualms about the fact that I could ever pick up again. I'm a recovering addict, but I'm still an addict. But
Yeah,
that's from somebody who doesn't have addiction. They don't.
yeah,
They're like, quit saying that. I'm like, I'm not. As soon as I quit saying that, as soon as I quit identifying as an addict, then those thoughts could creep in that, oh, hey, maybe I could go on vacation and have that pina colada with a cute umbrella on the beach. And
yeah,
I know how that story would end.
yeah, yeah. And I can't. There's some people that can have non-alcoholic drinks or mocktails or stuff like that. That's a slippery slope for me. I can't
Why
do.
would you want to? I wouldn't want to.
I,
Yeah, I
I,
agree. I agree.
No, can't do that.
No,
Can't, but that's a
I'll
no.
I'll stick to my probably toxic zero sugar Mountain Dew. This is my little vice now.
Hey,
Probably not good for
I'm
me
not
either, but it's okay.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's not for me.
No, I
I
agree. Me too.
I can't. That's just a slippery slope for me. I
Me too.
can't do it. So
I like being in my right mind, like that feels good. Like I like not having, I'm on zero medications. I'm so grateful for that. I've never been healthier physically, mentally, spiritually,
yeah,
and that's freedom. That's
it is.
complete freedom.
It is freedom. It
Hmm.
is freedom, and I'm happy for you. And
Thank
I'm
you.
not there yet. I still take
So
medications, but
no,
that.
no, there's no judgment because I mean, there are times. So yeah, don't take that the wrong way
Oh
because
no, no, no.
there are absolutely valid and good reasons for people to be on medications. I'm not advocating anybody to get off of it. But I'm just grateful that I'm not on anything,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I think I mean, I'm totally, if you can, that's great. I
right,
cannot.
yeah,
I
and that's okay too. That's okay too, Holly.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm, if at some point I can, that's great. Right now, I just have to. Um, but, but anyway, Sally, I really appreciate you taking the time because,
you're welcome.
we've had great times together, and I'm so grateful that, you know, you've shared some difficult times and some and some funny times that we've had, um, to hopefully inspire some people that are out there,
Yeah,
um, because it is a journey, and
it
it
is.
continues to, if you can stay, it continues to evolve. Mine's
Yeah.
evolved.
Mine's evolved. I encourage anybody who's listening to this, just please, we have a saying, don't give up before the miracle happens. And that's the truth. Please don't give up before the miracle happens. I got
Yeah,
goosebumps just saying that, but it's true. You know,
it's
I
true.
went from being nearly homeless to not having a penny to my name, to having a home and, good relations with my family and a good career. And it can happen for anyone. It really can.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am going to do our little deal and ask you the questions that we end the podcast with. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Here we go. First question: what skill would you like to ultimately master and why?
I have always wanted to learn carpentry, you
Ooh.
know? Yeah, like I'm very handy, I'm very creative. Um, I can refurbish furniture, I make jewelry, but I've always wanted to learn how to do carpentry, and like work with a skill saw and a cutoff saw and that kind of. So I don't know if it's in my future, but it interests me.
Well, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. What has been the highlight of your life thus far and why?
Oh wow. Whew. I mean, that's a big question because there've been many. I sometimes think about, do I regret having back surgery? Yes, I do, but if I hadn't had that back surgery, I wouldn't be where I am today. So um that's hard. It's hard. I will say that for today, this is probably the happiest I've ever been and the most content I've ever been in my life. I've had a lot of great moments. But I don't know that I can pinpoint one. I'm extremely grateful for the upbringing I had and being adopted into the great family that I had. That gave me the values that carried with me um, through the trials that I've had. So I know that's not a very good answer, but
Oh, that's okay.
okay.
I mean, there's if you've had plenty of highlights, then hey, it's better than some. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so what risk have you not taken that you would still like to take, and why haven't you?
Dum dum. Traveling. I don't like to fly, which is why I drove to Chicago, but I discovered on my trip to driving to Chicago, I don't like to drive either. I think that's the one thing is I don't know that it's a risk because I think I've overcome a lot of the things that I was afraid to do early on in recovery. So I think I've overcome a lot of that. Um, I would love to be able to overcome my fear of like traveling alone because I am single. So traveling alone and exploring and getting over my fear of flying and knowing like I'm very happy being alone, but knowing I could take on anything in this world on my own and be successful and do it comfortably.
Okay. All right. Do you have any nicknames or pet names?
I don't, the most that I get, people once they get to know me, they call me Sal, SAL, just for
Yeah.
short,
Yeah.
but I didn't have any nicknames or anything growing up. My dad called me Nay. My middle name is Renee, Sally Renee. So my dad
Okay.
called me Nay. Most people, once they get to know me, they call me Sal.
Yeah. Okie doke. What person, living, dead, or a character, do you most relate to and why?
Um, Probably my mom. I miss my mom more than I can even put into words. And the hard part about looking back on that, my mom saw me get clean in 2005. But then, she had Alzheimer's at the time. And from that point of me getting clean up until the time that she passed, she didn't know me. Um, and I long to be able to have those conversations with her. Like she's the one that gave me my values. She loved God. She taught me those things, and I think her being a prayer warrior when I was going through all the addiction and everything, I think it had a great deal to do with sustaining me and keeping me alive, you know.
Yeah.
So, I long to be like my mom. She was the best woman I ever knew. She really was.
Oh, that's a sweet, sweet answer. Okay, who do you admire and why?
Um, I admire anybody who can overcome this disease and this beast despite their circumstances. Like I said early on, I admire those that can make the decision to get clean or sober and change their life and turn it around and stop using. Anybody, and I mean anybody, can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And anybody that has the courage to embrace that, I have so much respect for.
Yeah, because it's not an easy task sometimes.
No.
Okay, so what has been your biggest, this is a trick question, by the way. What has been your biggest mistake or regret and why? Because usually mistakes are learning
Learning
experience.
lessons, yeah.
Yeah,
Trusting people over trusting God.
good point.
It's trusting, people will always, always, always let you down. We're humans, we're infallible, whether they mean to or not. We're going to always be disappointed, hurt. I've had so many friendships, relationships of where I had these grand expectations. This is something I still work on today. I expect others to treat me the way that I would treat them. And,
Yeah,
you know, if you're early on, lose that expectation because it's never going to happen. And what I've learned in the course of the last 4 or 5 years that even if you do me wrong, I'm still going to love you. My goal is to wake up each and every day and be a better version of the person I was yesterday. Um,
yeah.
And again, I have a very strong relationship with God, so I want to treat people the way God would treat people. I want to show unconditional love and no judgment toward people regardless. So,
Yeah. I was always told, and it may be from the noon meeting that we used to go to. Somebody might have said that at the noon meeting. I don't have to like you, but I do have to love you.
yeah, that's true. I don't like everybody, but I do love everybody for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's just the law of the land, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so what is your favorite curse word?
Um, so I used to have an extreme potty mouth, to the point that it really bothered me, and I worked really, really hard to not swear. So I try very hard to not swear because I think that you can make your point without it.
Well,
Um,
it's probably helpful that I'm no longer in North Carolina anymore.
I mean, the more you're around people that do swear, you have a tendency to swear. So I'm not gonna lie. On occasion, the F-bomb comes out of my mouth. I mean, I'm not proud of it. But it happens.
Yeah,
So I don't really have a favorite one. I try to be more, because for me, when I swear, it means that my temper has gone up,
sure,
and I'm trying to not let my emotions carry me. I'm trying to be in control. I'm
sure.
trying to respond and not react. When that F bomb comes out, it's because I'm being reactive instead of responding, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but
So are you saying fuck is your are your I'll
that's the
say it.
one that usually comes out.
Okay. Okay, I'll say it for you then.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, okay. So I'm gonna skip this one because you've already answered it earlier.
Okay.
Okay, so the last one is: what would you hope your higher power, God, universe, would say to you when you die or pass or transition? What would you hope he would say to you?
Well, I will quote the Bible, and that is, "Well done, good and faithful servant."
Yay! All right, and then I'm going to add one. But what would you tell a a person who is struggling or new to recovery? What would you tell them um, about what to expect in their first year of recovery? Like, what kind of like hope would you give them?
To go to a meeting every single day. Don't skip. Call your sponsor. Get a network. Don't give up. Don't use no matter what. And that's the big thing. Don't leave again. Don't leave before the miracle happens, because in the beginning, you are every day. Probably, I mean, for some, it's different for everybody, so I don't want to put a timestamp on it. But that first year is a beast. If you can make it successfully through the first year, you've gone through a lot of life's trials in that year. You've
Mm.
overcome a lot in that year. So the more you overcome, it just gives you that much more power to overcome the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So I would tell people, chase recovery like you chase using or drinking, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Sally. I'm
Thank
very
you,
great.
Holly.
I'm very grateful for you in so many ways, and especially walking through this journey with me in the beginning, because it's been very special to me, and you're very
Me too.
special to me for so many reasons.
Same,
Uh,
Holly. You hold a very special place near and dear in my heart, you know, from
mine.
our history, and you
Yep.
always will.
Yep.
Well, again, like we talked, we don't talk all the time. We follow each other on social media and we catch up, but like when we do talk and we do catch up, it's like we pick up where we left off. And that's the definition of true friendship, because you were asking about friendship. That's the a true friend you don't have to talk to every day. You don't
No,
have to, but you still have that bond and that friendship. And when you do talk and you pick up, and that's what makes it special.
Yeah, it is. And then we have a connection with Ellen and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
it is this very special bond and connection and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very grateful to you, and I'm so
Me
grateful
too.
that you've shared your journey and stuff. So thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me on.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this, and please stay with us for the next episode. So thank you so much, and we will talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.